Jeff, thank you very much indeed for that. I've only got abuse, I'm afraid, so we'll get straight to it.
That's all right, I'm used to it.
I'm going to ask you this, though, first of all, because you started on the social side of life before we got to the sport. We had a session yesterday with a guy called Gary Liu, who understands Gen Z like none of us did here. And they love digital. And they're on it 10 hours a day, he said, would be a median amount of time. How do you talk to people like that about managing their own lives? Because you stood up here and you said, mobile phone, evil.
I have, over the last 20 years, spoken to hundreds of audiences. Some are made up with audiences like these of what I would call a mature age. Others I have spoken to in schools. Others I have spoken to in outback rural Australia. It's about trying to, as I've tried to do today, to emphasise the importance of appreciating the things that I started with. Because we are seeing, there is 10% of all Australian males between the age of 5 or 7 on the NDIS scheme. Now, the NDIS scheme, for those from you overseas, is the National Disability Insurance Scheme. 10% of all young males are on this program where government helps them. I don't know how they got on. They're not mentally ill and they're not physically ill, which is normally the qualification, but they're in some ways suffering depression or stress, emotion, or having functional problems. Can you imagine, once these children get onto that scheme, there is no method for getting them off in real terms. And if they start progressing through their lives, understanding that government's going to provide for them, or their parents are going to have access to government money, and therefore that removes their personal responsibility, then we've got real problems down the track. Second point, because of so much of what's happened in the last few years, and please don't get me the wrong way, so much of what happened in terms of righting the scales, in terms of giving women opportunity, equal pay, better respect for women, is long overdue. But now, as we've seen in Australia, there have been a number of cases where men have been accused of foul play, let me just put it like that way, and the publicity surrounding that has been so great, before the court case determines whether there has been an offence or not, that both here and in the UK in particular, young men, teenagers to 20, are now increasingly concerned about developing a relationship with the opposite sex for fear that at some stage in the future, someone's going to come out and say they misbehaved. And then, as Andrew said, the suicide rate here is unacceptably high, 3 times our death roll. But think about it. Twice as many men, over twice as many men to women. And they're 20 to 45, and then they're 65 and over. How is it in a society such as this that we're going out killing ourselves, incrementally increasing every year? Because we don't respect ourselves. Because we've become complacent. Because only 3 or 4 of you put your hands up saying when you woke up this morning you appreciated waking up. Well, if you don't have a mechanism for dealing with stress and anxiety, then there's a bloody chance you're going to end up ill.
Let me move on to the sports area then. And you brought Britain into the equation. We've had a lot of incidents of bullying within sports, particularly at the elite end. But at the same time, you're saying here, don't cocoon your athletes, don't cocoon possibly your trainers as well. They've got to work things out for themselves. It's an incredibly fine line, isn't it? And I think you also, I'm interpreting what you said a little bit here, but you went very close to saying that racing and other sports are neglectful, in fact, of their some of their charges.
I'm not saying, it's unrealistic to say don't cocoon them. I'm saying make sure in that cocoon one end's open so that they can get the education that they can maintain friendships with people outside their trade as best they can. Don't close the cocoon. I've seen young boys come in at 18, they're massaged, people decide where they travel, where they stay, what food they eat, etc. So, no, I understand the need to train hard, etc. But please, open one end of the cocoon. And I'm not saying that the industries are doing a bad job. The industries are doing the best they can, and they're doing more today than they were 5 years ago, and they'll continue to do more. But they're all learning as well. But it's got to be a real priority. People in the industry have got to know what it is we're aiming to achieve. So that's developing the vision. So again, by way of example, and I don't mean to harp, years ago when I started as president of Hawthorn, I set a vision that over the next 5 years we would win 2 premierships and we would go from 28,000 members to 50,000 members. 5 to 50. That was our vision over 5 years. The beauty of a vision like that, it's easily understood. 5 to 50. The players understood it, the administrators, even the media understood it, right? So that was a winner. So you need to develop a vision so that every sector of your particular sport understands what you're trying to do. Now, you're not going to achieve everything, and there will always, sadly, be suicides, and there will always be people who fall by the wayside. But you've got to do your best to avoid it, and when you notice that they're falling, you've then got to grab them and try and help them.
So when you come to elite sport, and there is that we're going to hear from Glenn shortly, that relentless pressure to perform, and it's not just coming from within, it's coming from coaches, it's coming from managers, etc. What's your message to the manager, to the coach?
Well, I would desperately like, and I insist on, and I say it to politicians as well, however, whatever position you hold, you've got to take sufficient time off that you still remain part of a family, right? Your own family. And then secondly, you've got to take sufficient time off to reposition your own body. It's not just about physical and it's not just about mind. It's a combination of both. So you've got to be physically and mentally well. You can't do that, I genuinely believe, if you're under pressure 7 days a week to perform.
Keep some perspective, essentially, on life as well. Well, Jeff, you have obviously through Beyond Blue in particular, that is not about sport, that's about all of us. But you have a deep ingrained love of and interest in sport as well. Where does sport fit in the sort of, if you like, the progress table, the school report? I mean, how bad is sport at this?
Oh no, I think sport is terribly important. In fact, I would argue that sport and the arts are totally undervalued by the majority of the community and politicians. Why? Because when you have to do the things that you have to do from time to re-alter the course of the ship, you need something that the people's mind is taken off that economic change. And that is sport. And it is the arts. It's music, it's painting, it's sport, it's racing, it's everything. So I think they're very important. In 1992, when we were elected, we inherited a basket case. We had to make a lot of tough decisions. But we also invested a lot in sport and the arts. And people started to think again that they were winners, right? Now, they didn't all vote for us, as became obvious, but that doesn't matter. It is important that sport and the arts play a big role against the mood of the meeting, which might be obvious if, in fact, the economy gets worse, if, in fact, interest rates go higher, if, in fact, we end up in a recession, right? So, terribly important. That's why sport's got to be in a good place. And it's got to be in a good place from the top to the bottom.
That's the point I think that I was getting to. Where does it fit in its own performance in looking after people? I mean, you understand business, you understand schools and education and families. How does sport fare?
Well, I think, as I said earlier, I think they're trying to do the best thing. I think a lot's happened over the last 10 years in terms of education, mental health, etc. So everyone's trying. No one's perfect, though, and we can always do better. So each sport has got to ask itself, are we doing well enough? It's not for me to say, here's a criteria that you should be working on, because I don't know enough about any particular sport. But I do understand human emotion, and I do look at those suicide figures, and for every suicide there's at least 10 attempts to take their life. And I do understand what I consider to be a huge worry about what might be happening, and we won't know for 10 years, to so many men who are losing confidence of continuing to exist in the society as we know it today, in fear of what might happen in the future.
But isn't that's a product of the slightly immature state of affairs we're in with digital, for example, with online? That will change.
I think it's an outcome of two things. One is we've lived in very prosperous times, whether you like it or not, since the Second World War, where there's been a couple of economic bumps, there's been a couple of sideshows, and the other is just complacency. We have become so complacent. Most people under 40 today expect governments to provide everything, right? Without understanding that it's not government's money, it's our money. So this sense of personal responsibility for so many has disappeared. Only 3 or 4 people put their hands up earlier tonight or today. All right, don't think that's unusual. That's the norm. I can't believe it, but no one gives a... Anyway, there you are.
Jeff, I know you've got a dash. Thank you so much for being blunt, as you always are, but very to the point. Much appreciated. Have a nice walk back to your car the other side of the shed.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Jeff Kennett,
Stay
thank you
well,
very
everyone.
much indeed.
And Andrew, tomorrow, ask the question.